Before we start the discussion, let us invite Mr. Fahmi Shahab to do the opening remarks. Mr. Fahmi Shahab is Secretary General of Asia Pacific Center for Arbitration and Mediation, APCAM, and also Executive Director of the PMN, the Indonesian Mediation Center. And my name is Syed Faisal. Again, I will be moderating the overall event of today. Thank you so much, and let us welcome Mr. Fahmi Shahab.
Thank you, Mr.
Fahmi, time is yours. Okay.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I noticed from the registration we had at least from 11 countries, 200 plus participants. It is a pleasure to welcome everybody and the panelists and the moderator in this webinar. I hope that this event will be a source of discussion, enjoyable, even though in weekend it will be worth it for us to have a discussion on this theme on cultural issue in mediation. The recent development of economic free trade zones such as the TPP that consists of 12 countries, namely Australia, Brunei, Canada, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, New Zealand, Peru, Singapore, Vietnam, and US. If it rejoins the pact, it's a commercial zone of 800 million people with a combined economic power of 28 trillion US dollars. Another such zone is the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, made up of Asia Pacific nations, Australia, Brunei, Cambodia, China, Indonesia, Japan, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, New Zealand, the Philippines, Singapore, South Korea, Thailand, and Vietnam, with more than 2 billion people and the economic power of 26 trillion US dollars. These zones are not just cross-border commercial zones, but also cross-cultural interaction zones. As commercial disputes are inevitable, the question arises, do cultural differences really matter in a cross-border commercial mediation? Can culture issues really block the resolution of money issues? Don't money issues outweigh cultural issues? How should a mediator address cultural differences if the blockage in mediation, not a negotiation tactic employed by the parties? What are secret sauce can a mediator apply to manage cultural complexity in cross-border commercial dispute, commercial mediation? So it will be very interesting to have this discussion through the webinar. We from PMN, Pusat Mediasi Indonesia, or Indonesian Mediation Center, is one of the founding member of APCAM. We believe with such initiative could drive the area for dispute resolution that serve more efficient, faster, and will be more preferable for the parties in the region. We, as one of the founding members, believe that this combination of the hybrid mediation and arbitration would give a fully comprehensive service in preventing and also assisting the dispute resolution in this region for the commercial dispute. So most welcome, and I herewith open the session for the starting of the webinar on the culture in cross-commercial dispute mediation. Thank you, Pak Faisal. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Pak Fahmi. I agree with you. There are more a global connection in the future that will have an interface not only about the commercial but also the culture that belong to countries that being part of that free trade zone. Again, thank you so much. Now we are moving to Ms. Iram Majid, the Executive Director of Asia Pacific Center for Arbitration and Mediation, or APCAM. We will listen from Ms. Iram Majid about what is it APCAM that hosting the event today along with the PMN. Please. Iram, you're muted.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Please,
thank
Iram.
you so. Yeah, thank you so much, Faisal, for the warm welcome, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome you all to this webinar organized by APCAM. We have gathered here today for the discussion on the topic cracking cultural complexities in cross-border commercial mediation. Today, the practitioners and the parties as well as the lawmakers are coming to the consensus that for all kinds of complex disputes, including commercial disputes, mediation is an effective and a quicker mechanism for resolution of the dispute settlement. Thus, such evolution of commercial mediation often involves parties from across the nations pertain to disputes based in multiple jurisdictions. Hence, it becomes eminent for us to discuss the importance of the cross-cultural differences and the need for the lawyers, neutrals, and the parties involved to be familiar with such differences. In view of this, we need to understand what essentially does the term culture means. Culture is a set of shared assumptions, values, and beliefs of a group of people, which results in characteristic behaviors. Culture helps in shaping perception, which enables one to make sense of the world. These culture establishes one's cultural values, patterns, which helps in understanding the similarities and the differences across the societies. And these cultures are based on the different patterns and affiliation, like high context, low context, universalism, particularism, individualism, communitarianism, specific, diffuse, effective versus neutral. So these layers of cultural affiliation affects everything one does, including how to resolve conflict for oneself and how others should resolve conflict. So based on this understanding of a set of cultural beliefs become of much more significant when dealing in the cross-border dispute, as they involve a large gambit of subject, including political, social, and economic nature. Hence, it is imperative for a mediator to be sensitive to this issue involving culture in order to have an effective and result-oriented dialogue. Thus, in order to effective understanding of this, explain such complexities in detail surrounding cross-border commercial, we have organized this webinar, and which is in line with the APCAM's objective for nurturing the ideas of mediation as a dispute resolution process among the users, lawyers, students, and general public through academic medium and discourses. Such discourses can be conducted in present day world by means of webinars, as they allow us to engage with unlimited number of people, reach our target audience in virtual setting. This is dynamic and far more interesting than written content. With this, I invite and I'm handing over the session to Faisal once again, and I also invite, like to congratulate and welcome all the panelists for taking this endeavor and making enlighten us with the nuances of the surrounding of the topic for the day. Thank you so much, Faisal. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Iram. Very interesting that culture have many features and that could impact the mediation process. Ladies and gentlemen, that's the opening. Now we are going straight to the discussion. With us today, we have three excellent, exceptional speakers, if I may say, because they have very rich backgrounds, extensive experience, understanding the cultural complexity as well during their career. Let me introduce one by one of the speakers, and I'll have them introduce themselves as well more. But before introducing and calling the speaker, let me tell a little bit about how we will run the discussion today. So basically, we will have two segments. The first segment is very much about what is it that we talk about cultural complexity in commercial mediation. So it's about the what and the why. Why is it important and to discuss? Why is it important to understand that? Then after that, we'll have a Q&A. So that would be about half an hour from now. And if you have questions during our discussion with the speakers, please put that in the chat box, and then our team, the PMN webinar team, will collect the questions and perhaps even assemble one question with another. So then we'll have three questions that being produced, coming from you, as well as it's a mix one to another, that will be projected by PMM team on the screen. And after that, the speakers will have a discussion on that questions. Then we'll continue the session 2. The session 2, it is more about what we call the secret sauce. So let answer the question of, if we are in that cultural complexity situation, what should we do? What should we learn? What should we prepare? So that would be the second question. And then after that second question, then we'll have another question and answer again. Feel free to post your question in the chat box, and the PMN team will assemble the questions again and then project to the screen. Speakers will again discuss the questions. When we finish that, then we will be at the last session, where I will invite each of the speaker to give their final thought on the topic and the overall discussion. Then I will wrap up the discussion. I'll hand over to Fahmi and closing the event. So that's basically what we will do today, and we hope to close the event by 14:30. So now let us start this segment 1 of the discussion, the introduction. We have with us, we have Danny, we have Delcy, and we have Raymond. And I'll start to call Danny first. Danny McFadden. Can you start introducing yourself a little bit? Now, this is not an interview, because this question, like, tell me about yourself, is very much an interview question, but it is not, Danny. Go ahead, Danny. You're muted. Okay. Now you're on.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Terima kasih, Pak Faisal. Selamat siang. Thank you very much for everyone, and to APCAM for giving me the opportunity to be at this discussion today. It's a very important and actually very practical discussion. This is not theory. So I'll lead on to talking about culture. We all have our own personal cultures. We are all multi-layered. Part of my culture is both European, and also from about 1983, I've lived, worked, and done many things in Asia, especially China. So I speak Chinese fluently, and I've been training and mediating in China, Hong Kong for many years. So that's what I will focus on today, the intercultural relationships that I've found between my experience as a non-Asian person, I should put it that way, and my experiences in places like Korea, Vietnam, and also to a degree in Indonesia. I won't say too much more about my background. Like Raymond, I also work for the World Bank Group. So I do workplace mediation for the World Bank. I'm a commercial mediator, and I'm doing it all online at the moment. So, for instance, I did a case quite recently where the parties were from the USA and the other party was from another Asian country. I won't say which one because I want to preserve confidentiality. But it's amazing. In 2 days of mediation, we managed to settle for many, some millions of US dollars. So I would like to emphasize that this is practical stuff. Now, during that mediation, cultural issues were a factor. So that's something that we can hopefully draw upon today in a practical way. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. One little question. You're quite moving around here and there. Was that part of a mediation job? Is it or different story?
Well, it's partly because of my work, Faisal. I work in for many years prior, I'm a lawyer and a mediator. Before I went into law in Australia, I was actually a business person. So if you'll pardon the expression, I had a real job before I went into law. And I was in business for many years in Asia. So that actually was very useful later, because mediation is about negotiation. And so I had a lot of experience prior to being a mediator with negotiating, and especially negotiating with parties from Southeast Asia.
Interesting. So I think that also what we call one of the reasons that you get more interested as well in these cultural issues, because your previous job already exposed you to different countries, which means also different countries, different cultures. So that's interesting. We'll talk more about that. I'll go to Delcy. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Faisal, and thank you, Ram, for the very nice introduction to this webinar. I'm going to apologize for my lack of Indonesian, but the only thing I know to say is selamat pagi. This is a phrase that was taught to me by my daughter, who was doing Indonesian at school. But my background, just very briefly, you might have guessed by my funny accent, I was born in Peru in South America many, many moons ago, became a lawyer, and I work in international trade law before working with the United Nations in a peacekeeping operation in Cambodia, where I met my handsome Australian husband, who convinced me to come and live in Australia. And so I have made Australia my home. But I came to mediation almost by accident, of course, once, and my colleagues, my female colleagues will understand this. Once you become a mother, your profession sort of takes second priority. And those days in the early 90s, talking about mediation was a foreign word for everybody, but especially in the legal profession. So I trained as a mediator in 1994, and I have become a full-time mediator since the year 2000. I have lived in many, many places, just like Danny, lived in Europe, where I studied, in France, in Switzerland, in Italy, and I lived in Cambodia, of course, for a year, and then obviously in Peru, and now in Australia. So I am multicultural, just for the fact that I've been living in all these places, but also because in my country of origin, in Peru, I am half Inca, so I'm half indigenous, and the other half is also Spanish and Italian. So it is quite interesting that we are talking about this topic, because in the old days, people didn't move too much. But these days, it is a global economy. Everybody goes everywhere. And it is essential that we understand what cultural sensitivities there are, not only for mediation, but outside of that. But of course, in mediation, it takes particular importance, because we need to build empathy between the parties. And how do you do that if you don't know the cultures? So you have to be aware and sensitive of this topic of culture. And so hopefully today, we might agree and might disagree about a number of things, but that is the reason why we have set up this webinar. So thank you.
Thank you, Delcy. So I'm just curious. So you're exposed already with different cultures because of previous job and where you live, even before you enter the mediation. Am I correct?
Correct.
I see. So that is interesting. So for you, the multicultural, the cultural complexity is something that you have felt with moving with different organization as well as in different countries?
Sure, it is not just about, I think, living, but trying to understand different people and different ways of understanding life in general. So in my current work as a consultant for the World Bank, I do environmental disputes in the region and in other parts of the world. And we have always parties who come from different cultures, from different countries, from different legal systems. So this also has allowed me to learn from the work. You know, it's almost like you jump in the pool and you just have to learn how to swim. Today we are lucky that we have a lot of expertise, you know, like Danny and Raymond in this room, and many other colleagues I know they have registered for this event. But in the old days, you just have to do with whatever you had at hand. So I think, yeah, we are very fortunate that we can share these experiences.
Thank you so much. Raymond, please. Can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Pak Faisal, thank you very much. Selamat siang bagi teman-teman di Indonesia, Pak Fahmi. My background, well, I think I come from a family who likes to play jokes on their children. I was born in Scotland, but somehow my father was an internationalist, so he gave me a Chinese name. Ever since I've been called Raymond Lee, wherever I go, people say, "Are you Chinese? Do you have Chinese blood?" Unlike Danny, I really don't have any Chinese connections and I don't know much about China. But I did come to Southeast Asia about the same time Danny did. And like Delcy, it was for someone I loved and who later I married, and came to Indonesia and came in 1982, and I've lived in Indonesia ever since. And people in Indonesia might be saying, well, why is forgive the term, bule talking about us? I think to discuss culture, culture is differences. We all breathe air, we all breathe the same air, and we don't notice it. But if, Faisal, you were breathing, well, sometimes you do breathe smoke, but that's all you breathe, and nobody else breathes smoke, we'd say, oh, he's different. We notice the differences when we move from one place to another. And I've spent my life trying to figure out why on earth do people behave like they do here in Indonesia? I just don't understand it. I got so frustrated, I wrote a TV series and it became very popular. But when I point out these things, my frustrations to my Indonesian friends, they say, oh yeah, you're right, Pat. We are like that. It's seeing the differences. So that's me.
Thank you. So you're mentioning about you making movies as well, Raymond.
Sometimes. It's a very profitable business.
So we are waiting for you to one day to have a movie on mediation.
Yeah, the trouble. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So it's interesting. I mean, all of the speakers have exposed or have been exposed to different cultures because of the way they live or the work and also the interest. I'm going to start with a very basic what in terms of this topic. So tell us a little bit about this cross-borders commercial mediation. I'm going to go to Delcy. What is this when we said about cross-borders commercial mediation? What do we mean by that? Is that like two countries getting involved, or it's just different companies, or anything inside a country as long as involve foreigners that can be called cross borders commercial mediation? Delcy, please. Unmute, please.
Okay, please, can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. That is a very interesting starting question. And I think if we analyze a little bit the word or the words cross-border, it means outside your border. And I think initially the term might have come from countries which actually have borders, like in Europe, for example, or in some Asian countries. But if you think about Australia, for example, we don't have borders with anyone. So cross-border is a term that we use in international commercial law as to commercial agreements that can be made by two different entities which have their headquarters in different countries. So we will have, for example, one in Mongolia and the other one in Hungary. Or we can have one in Australia and then the other one in New Zealand. So when we talk about cross-border disputes, we refer to the fact that there are some agreements, some contracts that have obviously resulted in a dispute between two entities, two legal entities that come from two different countries. So why do we talk about cross-border these days is because, especially since the Singapore Convention has been signed, it has become now very popular to talk about what is this international commercial mediation, what it is about cross-border disputes. So there are some definitions within the Singapore Convention itself that characterizes what is an international mediation and what is an international dispute. But it is basically what we are discussing. It is a dispute that has been resulted from a breach of a contract, or something has gone wrong in the implementation of the contract between two legal entities that belong to two different countries. I don't know if that was clear enough, Faisal, but I'm sure Danny and Raymond also will have some ideas about this.
Maybe Danny can respond as well.
Yes, sure. Thank you, Pak Fahmi. Yes, I mean, really, I don't want to say too much because I think Delcy has covered it, and she mentioned, which I was going to mention also, is, and we may have further discussion about it today, is the Singapore Convention. So there is now an added focus on what people call international disputes and that definition. So that's all kind of very legal. And I suppose as lawyers, we do need to understand that. However, today we're going to talk about the cultural issues potentially arising from those types of cases. And it doesn't mean that you can't have a domestic case between two, even I presume, and Raymond will be able to sort of embroider on that. But for instance, you could have two parties in Indonesia or two parties in China. I'll stick to China, which I know better. I might have a party from Beijing and one from Shanghai. And although it's not an international case, and although they are all Chinese, there's actually sometimes quite major cultural differences. For example, the people in Beijing spend a lot of effort on relationship. But if they come from, say, Guangzhou down in the south of China, they're much more commercially minded, and it's their emphasis will be, and it's, remember, a domestic case, not an international case, they will focus on the money aspect. And as a mediator, I need to have an appreciation of that, because that will affect how I can assist the parties, how I can help them to facilitate a negotiated agreement.
Okay, so you are saying, Danny, that even though within the same jurisdiction, the cultural differences is matter for the negotiation.
Yes, exactly. And I'm sure colleagues
Okay. So in the negotiation, I think there is some suaranya. Sorry for the interference. So in the commercial dispute, if you have two parties from two different cultures, and the mediator has been chosen, one mediator, for example, how a mediator will prepare for such negotiation, Pak Raymond?
Well, for me, it's important to try and give some indication of cultural differences, which can be quite difficult because people always expect other people to behave the way they expect them to behave, and are usually very intolerant of different styles of behavior. And it can be tough. I mean, Indonesians in Indonesia, people like, generally speaking, like a relaxed, informal discussion, laughter, smiling, even when you're trying to resolve a dispute. Yeah. Western Europeans would want to communicate their disapproval with a stern face, and you're automatically on misreading each other. The Indonesians may be very disturbed by this stern face and stern voice, and actually feel scared by it or intimidated. And the European party may actually feel offended because the Indonesians don't seem to be taking things seriously. That's just one thing I think you can see. But you need to, as a mediator, you need to be sensitive to those things and prep people and say, this is going to happen. I got into trouble in one mediation